You're watching Newsfeed AM. Let's give you the markets update now. Local trade upbeat this morning after the 1.52% strong close from the rand yesterday. Now, the currency strengthened against a weaker dollar after the U.S. Federal Reserve signaled that it would pass, or should I say pause, its interest rates hike. That cycle has, at least for the moment, been paused. Now, stocks on the JSE also closing slightly higher, with both the bubble chip, that's the top 40, and its broader all-share index ending the day up more than 0.4%. Let's talk now to Matete Thulare. He is Head of Foreign Exchange Execution at Rand Merchant Bank. Mr. Thulare, thank you very much for your time. It looks like the rand is over the so-called weakness trend. Talk us through what factors are driving trade in that regard.
Good morning, Tony. I suppose you're right. The rand continuing its grind stronger yesterday, and we managed to trade down to 1802 in a very thin New York session in the evening session. I mean, the continued strength comes from the Fed raising interest rates by 25 basis points, as you alluded to, and obviously they're now signaling that they may hold back now for further rate hikes, obviously, as the banking crisis unfolds in parts of the world. And yesterday's 1802 was the best level that we've seen the rand touch since the middle of February. Now, across the board in Asia this morning, we did see the dollar trade in very tight ranges as the markets are still digesting the Fed comments and obviously the banking crisis that is unfolding. So already last night you saw comments from U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen saying that she's prepared to take further action to make sure that American bank deposits are staying safe, and obviously that has helped calm some nerves in the market. Now, markets have been really battered as two U.S. banks have failed, and then the collapse of Credit Suisse a week ago has sent through shockwaves across the industry. And I think this is also now bringing investors to think about 2008 when we had the financial crisis. So as this morning, we're seeing the rand around the 1810 mark, and I suppose we're going to be trading in a range from 1801 to potentially 1821 up until next week when we have the local monetary policy committee meeting where the Sechakganyago and team will obviously be giving us their interest rate decision.
Well, let's talk commodities. Oil prices dropping as the U.S. holds back on refilling the oil reserves, while gold, on the other hand, is faltering as the U.S. dollar gains some strength. Give us your outlook on the commodities cycle.
So the commodity market outlook, I mean, if you think about it, gold has, risen almost 3% over the past two trading sessions, as obviously the markets are assessing the mixed signals that we are getting from the recent interest rate decision from the Fed. I mean, gold is trading just under $2,000 an ounce, which is marking a one-year high. And it is still receiving some support, obviously, as a safe haven currency on the back of the banking crisis. But when you look at the likes of oil, I mean, oil is also headed for a weekly advance. Obviously, there's speculation that the Fed may not be hiking as now we'd been expecting them to. And obviously, there's also now China, which is continuing to leave the COVID zero further behind. And obviously, crude at this point in time remains for its deepest first quarter drop since 2020 when the pandemic first started. And I mean, this slump has obviously been driven by the potential U.S. recession, the robust Russian flows, obviously despite the Western sanctions that are happening there. And also there's been strikes at some of the refineries out in France as well. So this is why you're seeing the different markets play themselves out, especially for the gold market and the oil market.
Let's talk company news. Northam Platinum publishing its interim results for the 6 months which ended on the 31st of December 2022. How have they fared?
So Northam saying obviously that the profit for the first half of this year has increased amid the high sales revenue. I mean, they did say that the profit ended for December 31st was 6.2 billion rand, compared to the 3.5 billion rand that we saw a year ago. Now, they're saying that the period under review has seen continued production growth. Obviously, as a group strategy unfolds, I mean, there is challenges, in respect of the mining inflation. There's also the load shedding events that are obviously hampering their growth strategy. But they're saying, look, despite all of these things, they're demonstrating the power of the counter-cyclical investments, and obviously their growth programs remain on track. Now, if you think about Northam, they've been involved in a takeover war with Impala Platinum over Royal Bafokeng Platinum. Now, Northam owns about 35% of Royal Bafokeng, whilst Implat owns about 40%. Now, in November last year already, Northam Platinum has announced its firm intention to make an offer to Royal Bafokeng to acquire all the offer shares for the offer consideration. And I think this is still under review. And I think for a lot of market watchers, this is something that from a corporate action perspective, everybody's trying to see who will actually take over Royal Bafokeng Platinum. Will it be Northam Platinum or will it be Impala Platinum? So I think for them, despite the great results, I think for them, their focus at this point in time is the acquisition at play.
Let's conclude the conversation with the fund manager, Coronation, which has upped its stake in taxi financier, that's a Transaction Capital, from 14.4% to just more than 16.57%. What does that signal for you? Is it a vote of confidence, which perhaps may have helped the share price? How is it doing?
So look, I mean, Coronation yesterday, they think that the share price of Transaction Capital could recover. I mean, at least of its two businesses, they think have got excellent long-term prospects. I mean, already Coronation is the second largest shareholder of the Public Investment Corporation. Now, already we saw Transactions Capital share price lose almost 70% last week after it released its updated financials, saying that the taxi finance division, which is SA Taxi, that has got some structural problems in nature, meaning that they could come with a problem whereby, there could be a 50% drop in their earnings. Now, taxi owners, just like a lot of consumers, have been struggling to repay their vehicle finance loans. Obviously, there's higher traffic density, there's longer trips in traffic due to load shedding, there's higher fuel at this point in time, there's rising vehicle and spare part costs, which is obviously factoring into all of these. And I think this is obviously showing you the structural nature of the weak economy. Now, Coronation Asset Management yesterday coming out to say that they think that We Buy Cars and Newton, which is the two divisions within Transaction Capital, they think that those have got excellent long-term prospects. And I think this, on the back of them buying the shares and obviously increasing their shareholding, they think that with the obvious long-term prospects of these two divisions, this is why they're buying. And I think this is them betting for the long term instead of the negative sentiment that has been coming through from the rest of the market.
Matete Thulare, let me thank you very much for that markets update. He is the head of foreign exchange execution at Rand Merchant Bank.